three. Hello, everybody. So now we're going to talk today about sections and building sections, one building section type. So there is this resource we have here at the office called Fundamentals of Building Construction. And it is a PDF and it has several different chapters. It talks about foundations, wood, heavy timber, wood light frame construction, interior finishes, everything. But it's not just talking about it. It's probably one of the best resources I've ever had to use to understand how buildings come together as a book. From what type of concrete, what type of foundation to use, and all that stuff, the different types of foundations, all of that stuff. I am sharing this so that you guys know you have access to it, and I'm going to send it because I'm going to be showing you a simple wood section, wood frame construction section. And guess what? It talks about wood, different types of wood, different types of species, different types of way of cutting it, all the way. But there is these diagrams, and I'm going to show you very quickly. That probably it's not there, but they show you how all of it comes together. All of it, how it all comes together, right? So how the plywood and the floors, all of it, platforms, how they pin down the foundations, where do they put the foundations, all of that stuff is being explained here. Okay, so when you have a question about these things, you could easily look at framing plans, how framing plans are done. Things I am going to talk to you about a little bit now in this part one, because I believe it's going to be multiple parts, but it's very, very useful. Very, very useful. I cannot stress that enough. Again, explains everything framing wise. Okay, then roofs. What are the different types of roofs, right? This is our dictionary. We have flat roof, shed roof, gambrel roof, hip roof, gambrel roof, mansard roof, gable roof, right? Like we got all of those things. Stairs, how stairs are done to get done, how these pieces are cut, dormers, how the framing works. I think we should have a physical copy of it, but since we have it digitally, I'm going to send this to all of you, and I want you all to use it, please. Very, very, very good. Most of our work is this. That's it, wood. So we have to really understand all of these elements and how they all work together. And it gets into not only wood, but steel. And we're doing a steel frame structure that we didn't know what to do because we've never done a house made out of steel. So that was a new one. So on that note, that resource is going to be sent to all of you right now in an email. And then after I send it to that, I want you to get familiar with it on your spare time, look at it. I know some of you go to school, some of you are busy, some of you have a bunch of stuff. So I don't expect you to go all bananas with it. Just know that if you don't know something, you know where to find it. With that being said, I'm going to do a simple wall section. Before I talk about the wall section, I'm going to really quick talk about elements that we have that exist here. So, and I'm going to pull this piece. So we have a bunch of detail elements, and I'm going to do this wall section with detail lines. Not that you should, I'm just showing you how to do it from scratch. So wood framing elements that we typically use, 2x4s, 1x4, 1x3, 2x12, things like that. Those are lumber pieces. So that's a 2x12. If you ever need to make a 2x10 or a 2x8, you can just duplicate this one and make it. But you need to know one thing. This is not a true 2 inches by 12 inches. Lumber pieces before were true dimensions. Now these are called nominal dimensions. Nominal dimensions. Let me just type this real quick. So there is nominal dimensions. And then there is true dimensions. I always make some weird example, but I'm going to do it right now. The fact that Napoleon's horse was named, I think, Black, but he actually was a white horse, doesn't necessarily mean that the name is what he actually represents. Does it make sense? You know, he had I think he was a white horse, and the horse was named white, but he actually was black. So what I'm saying is that the fact that it says 2x12 doesn't necessarily mean it's 2 inches by 12 inches. In wood, all the way from 2 by 4, 2 by 6, 2 by 8, and 2 by 10, they are less. So let's do this real quick. So actually I can show it. So this is called a 2 by 12. That's the name. When you go to edit, it is actually 1.5. This is actually wrong. It should be by 11.25. Okay. 2 by 12s are 1.5 by 11.25. All right. A 2 by 4 is actually 1.5 by 3.5. Let me make it clear. All the way from 2 by 4, 2 by 6, 2 by 4, 2 by 6, 2 by 8, I believe it is. They are and a half. Then from there up, it becomes a quarter for them. Okay, and we can Google that stuff. And that book can explain it a little bit better. I get it confused sometimes. So, but they are not the true dimensions. The 1.5 is always 1.5. That's always 1.5. Okay. But understand those sizes, that they are not necessarily true. 2 by 12 is not 11.5. It's actually 11.25. A 2 by 10 is not 9.5. It's actually 9.25. All right, does it make sense? And we can Google it. Let's do it here so that we can actually ensure that we all understand it. Wood lumber dimensions. So guess what? 2 by 6 is 1.5 by 5.5. 2 by 8 is 1.5 by 7.25. 2 by 10 is, so only the 2 by 4, 2 by 6 are 1.5. Then the other ones are all 1.25. Okay, you see that? This is the name. This is the dimension. Make sense? So we're good. Why am I talking about that? Well, simple. These are the guys that are going to support your building. If you don't know them, then you don't know how to support your building. So typically when I do a section, I think about levels before anything else. I'm going to have a floor level, let's say. I'm going to have a foundation level, let's say. And let's say there is another floor here, or maybe not. And I start setting up those things in my mind. Like you don't have to draw it, but in my mind. So what goes in the foundation? So if you want to start from the basement, so slab. So you can start with a slab, and slabs typically kind of look like that, right? So that's a slab, right? So where does this slab sit? By the way, it doesn't have to have the footing like that at the end. It shouldn't actually have it, but this is the one I'm using right now. So you don't have to use that. So slab is the first thing that goes in there. Then how does this work? Well, if it's a finished basement, the next thing that you're gonna have is perhaps a 2 by 4 that's gonna frame that wall. Okay, and then this is a 2 by 4 plate that has to be pressure treated because it's connected to a concrete piece, right? And when you have a wood piece with concrete, it's got to be treated so that it doesn't rot, or at least takes longer to rot. But those then are going to have studs going about 16 inches on center from there, right? So that starts making sense right there. So you have that. So what's right up to that? Well, right up to that is going to be a foundation wall that's made out of concrete. And you may not know the thicknesses of these guys, but you know the relationship of these guys. So if you have a foundation wall right there, that's your foundation wall, right? It actually has a footing and all that stuff. But again, I'm just trying to explain the basics on this first module. And let's say that's our foundation. Let's say our dirt is somewhere in here. So that is starting to make sense. What else do? We need a sill plate. That's gonna be right here. Do we make it out of 2 by 4s? No, we do those out of 2 by 6. And what is a 2 by 6? If we don't have a 2 by 6 here, which probably do, here you go. They are 1.5 by 5.5. Sometimes we put double of those. Then what other element that goes in there? And I'm actually not gonna go into detail of the elements, just the structure real quick. So we have the 2x6, great. Is flushed with this space so that water doesn't just get into the building. It's got to be flushed. If you do that, water and ice pile in that spot and then it gets into the building. You don't want that. Does it make sense? Great. So what else do we have? We have something called a band joist. The band joist is actually typically made out of whatever the structure is going to be. If it's 2x8s, that's what it is. If it's 2x10s, whatever the framing for the floor is going to be. I'm going to call this a 2x10. Is a good one to use. And that is used to attach the joists that are gonna, the floor joists that are gonna go at 16 inches on center on the other direction. Does this make sense so far? Then the next thing that goes in here is gonna be plywood or some sort of subfloor. I don't care what you put, it's a subfloor. This is called platform framing. So it might be plywood. So plywood, clients have been requesting that we use 1/2 inch. I've been using 3/4 because it's pretty sturdy, but that sits right on top of these guys and it's going on the other direction. All right. So then what else do we have? Well, now we begin to actually frame our wall. We have another plate. So this is the sill or mop plate. This is the bottom plate. This is the band joist. Bottom plate, band joist, sill plate. This is another type of sill plate or mop plate. Okay. Then what do we have? We put our joists that are gonna go, I mean, our floor or studs that are gonna go at 16 inches on center on the other direction. Okay, so that's generally our framing right there. I'm going to get just as far as actually populating some of the simple elements in here, and then you guys can go, we can continue this later. All right, so that note, what do we need now? Right now, this is all open. You probably have seen framing open. This is open right now. You can see through the studs, you can see through everything. So what does that look like? You know, let's say just building framing. So right now I just have these exterior guys like this. This is what I'm showing you, with the exception that I did put plywood in here. You see the band joist right here. You see the bottom plate, right? You see the mud plate. This is not showing the foundation right now, but that's what I'm showing you right here. These guys. What do we put next? We're going to put our exterior sheeting, which may be made out of plywood, and we use a zip system that does not require something called an air and vapor barrier. That's detailed. We'll explain that later. I always want you to overlap this guy. Why? Because if you do it like that, water does still have a chance of going through there and breaking your, your foundation and leaking in there. Overlap it by at least 1/2 inch or 1 inch or so. Okay. Then, okay, so these guys, they basically are getting attached to your studs. Okay. And typically, like I said, we put, if they don't have a zip system, which is again, something very detailed, I don't have to go into it right now. You put some plastic. You've probably seen some buildings that have some plastic. That's for air and vapor barrier. We represent it with the dash line. Then what goes on top of that? What you guys see, the finish. The finish, this is a thermal protection and water protection. The other one is actually the sort of heat protection, like from the heat and the actual thing that will protect us from the weather. So siding, depending on what you use, in this case, I'm using siding. I actually think I have a repeating component for siding. So there are different components. Siding, a repeating component. So here you go. That's how it goes right there. Boom, boom, boom. The siding gets attached to the whole thing. You don't have that space like I showed it in there. It's actually attached right up to it. That's your siding right there. That's your clapboard. If it's a different assembly, it will look differently, but this is just for the purpose of explaining the system to you. So you get your siding, you get your sheeting. Why are we missing? Well, inside, this is open right now. What goes inside? Insulation needs to go inside, right? insulation is represented like this if you're using bad insulation. Then you were ready to close up those walls. What do we put inside? Typically, we put gypsum wall board. Gypsum wall board, which is written with GWB. You can finish it with any other type of material. I'm using gypsum wall board here to explain it, but sometimes there are people that finish this thing out of wood, like plywood pieces, and it looks very nice. Some people finish it out of something else. So let's just do gypsum wall board very quickly. Yeah, it's right here. So I'm gonna use 1/2 inch. It's typically what we use for a residential application. And that's that. Then what do? I mean, this is ready to paint and put a finished flooring. The finished flooring sits right on top of the plywood. So, but our dimensions on heights are actually taken from the plywood. This is what the builders care about. The framers care about. The finished people don't care about it because your building is already framed and ready. They just attach to it. So dimensions are typically taken from the plywood to that, right? So that's, you know, floor to floor height right there in your basement. So this basement is not necessarily finished. To finish it, we need a top plate here also, which may go like that. We also probably will put insulation inside, which will not be 5.5 inches because we're not using a 5.5 inch stuff. Oh, my bad, that was big. 5.5 inches. Oh no, 3.5 inches, my bad. So that goes in here, your insulation. Then what do we have? Well, particle board again, or gypsum wall board, right? Right there. One thing though, we need something to do our finished ceiling. That thing is called strapping. And I have a repeating component for strapping, and they're made out of 1x3. And where do they attach? They attach directly to the underside of the structure. And they go perpendicular to it. That's why you do see it in this case. Why do we use that for? Well, that gets attached to your structure, and then your finished gypsum wall board gets attached to it. And in this case, now you have a nicely finished ceiling. Okay, what else are we missing? Insulation inside this space. Yeah, we put insulation from the ceiling of the basement to the other one, and that will be made out of, instead of 5.5 or 3.5, it will be 9.25 because we're using 2x10s. Great. We have right now a finished space. It's just missing a finished flooring. It's just missing another finished flooring in here. But this is the basic for that condition right here. Okay, so I'm not gonna get into more detail on this one. I will probably bring aboard another section that's much more refined and finished. But what did we learn today? Our structural members, which are all of these elements that we know here for framing. We know that now that the exterior face of framing is flushed with the exterior face of concrete. We know that we need strapping to attach to the flooring assembly, and that we need insulation to be consistent and continuous throughout. We know that, you know, gypsum wall board attaches to the stud, and then this sheeting gets attached to the stud. And these are the major elements. I mean, like from here on, I mean, you have your foundation, right? You have your dirt, you have an air and vapor barrier outside. We can go on and on this stuff, right? That does that. We can have a little French drain right here for water purposes, so that water hits this and goes into this pipe and doesn't create a lot of hydrostatic pressure. We can go up and start framing our windows and our roofs and our ceilings. But this condition right here is huge. Anybody has any questions? If not, we can just wrap it up right here today.
I do have a question, but it's not specifically related to well, but it's like, how do you create that repetitive component?
Repeating components, extremely good question. Very good question. So it is a Revit question more than anything. But to create a repeating component, so repeating components are no more than just a detail component that you've told it to repeat in certain fashion. I have to think a little bit now real quick though. So let me think. So repeating component, I'm gonna select that repeating component. They have a family, by the way. And they are on the project browser. If you go on the project browser and you go to families, you go to annotative symbols. There are some components in here. I'll show you right now, actually, very easy. There are multiple ways to do this, but one of them is number one, how Darwin does everything. I never invent anything. I always use something that already exists. So I already have a repeating component in here, and it's a 1x3 strapping at 16 inches on center. So let's confirm first that it is at 16 inches on center. So from the center to the center or so needs to be 16 inches. Great. Yeah, it is because it's 12 plus 4. So that's about 16 inches on center. That's fine. What I do is I grab something that's already created. I come in here, I duplicate it and say, I'm going to do 2x10 at 16 inches on center. What do I do now? Well, I go in here and pick the 2x12 or 2x10, 2x10. So you're gonna pick a 2x10 component, which you probably already have. Boom. And what's the distance? It's going to be 16 inches. That's the right distance right there. Boom. And now I have created a 2x12 at 16 inches, 2x10 at 16 inches on center. Does it make sense? If you need to, you know, that's fixing the distance, you can change it so the distance is variable to fill a space and so forth. You can rotate it so that it is like that, which is how we will use it, right? That's how we will use these guys, right? You will see them like this. But that's how you can create any repeating component for anything, honestly. There's ways to create a standard profile that then you can turn into a repeating component, but that's much more than what we can do right now, right this second. But this is how I always make any repeating component that I ever needed to do. So this one is created like that. This, you know, that one, this one's created like that. This one comes with Revit, but it is just a repeating component, but they made it and it just comes with Revit. But you can make a repeating component out of anything. So let's say you want to duplicate this one and create, let's say, I don't know, a brick, right? There's a repeating component. Now there already probably is one actually. So I'm going to say brick 2, right? What do? You pick the detail element, right? Look for brick. You know, running section, whatever. And then you tell it how far they're gonna repeat. You have to tell it though. So you have to make sure that the dimensions here are making sense. Does it make sense? And that's how you create a repeating component. With that being said, anybody has any other questions? So 2 main takeaways is if you don't understand any of this, you can always watch the video, but you can always go back to this book and understand a little bit more about it. This book, again, is amazing. Amazing. If we all get to a very deep and detailed understanding of framing construction for wood like this or steel, our designs are going to be much more better because we know what we can get away with and what we cannot get away with. We know how all of these elements work and how they're put together. Very, very, very important. We're going to talk later about other elements of the section, but you saw all of these elements right now. There are multiple ways of insulating. There are multiple ways of doing everything. If you know one very well, the other ones become a lot easier. With that being said, thank you so much, and let's get back to work, people. Thank you.